Well, hello, my friend, and welcome back to another episode of Legacy Farmer, the podcast. This is your host, JC Young, and today's topic of discussion is this: courage and decisions. So it has come up in some reading and stuff I've been doing lately, and I wanted to share and talk about a pretty important concept that comes into what our family farms face on honestly, a day-to-day basis. And working with family is great until it isn't, because here's the problem with family members is it's hard to find the leader inside of the operation. Now, what do I ultimately mean by that? Well, we got to look at what really defines a leader. And a leader is someone who is going to say what needs to be said regardless of how it's going to make people feel, right? A leader is going to be somebody who says the truth regardless of how it's going to make somebody feel. And the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems when it comes to working with your family inside of the farm operation is nobody's really willing to step up and lead, because we have this fear of making somebody else upset, whether it's your parents or your brother or your grandparents or your cousins or whoever that is. And this is just the problem, guys. Nothing gets done in that type of environment, right? Nothing gets done. So typically, everybody has opinions inside of the operation, but there's not one person that's actually designated as a leader. There's no accountability chart. There's nothing in place. So your operation continue to just operate just in absolute chaos, right? And obviously we don't want that. But until you have somebody that's a leader inside of an organization and is willing to take on that role, you're not going to progress. You're not going to get the results that you ultimately want inside of the operation. Everybody's going to continue to be frustrated and be resentful, because when you are in those types of situations where you know you want to say something and even the other person knows you want to say it, but you don't have the balls to actually do it, that makes you look even worse, right? And it's vice versa too, right? And there's this weird energy and this uncomfortable energy that's created when you're working with family, and this type of stuff is going on. So First step we have to take in solving this problem is somebody's got to step up and be the leader, right? And the leader is somebody that typically is going to have an overarching like 30,000 foot view of the operation. Okay, somebody that's just like stuck in their own little world and then doesn't see how the entire operation connects and how all the moving pieces are working there. That person is never going to be a leader. Okay, because they're too stuck in their closed mind and just their world. Now, will they be a great operations manager? Will they be a great person to run the tractor or feed cattle or whatever? Yeah, that's great. Keep them in their area though, because the leader has to be able to have the viewpoint and have the awareness to look at the operation from a 30,000 foot view and see what decisions to make. Right. And again, the decisions that need to be made are not always going to be the most favorable ones, especially when you're working with family. Even when you're not working with family, like my team on Legacy Farmer, I have to make some decisions on when I'm running this company, and it may not be favorable to them, but at the end of the day, I'm trying to do what's going to end up being the best decision for everyone. And there's going to have to be some short-term sacrifices to capture some long-term gains. The problem when you're working with family inside of the farm operation is nobody's willing to make the short-term sacrifices. And this is the problem with family and money. This is the problem that I saw inside of my granddad's operation. This is the problem that we see in the 300 plus families that we work with. This is a common discussion that comes up on our community boardroom calls that we have every single week with all of our members inside of Legacy Farmer. And the thing is, guys, is one, like I said, somebody's got to step up and be the leader. So you have to identify who that person is. The second piece of this, though, is you can be the greatest leader in the world, but if you don't have the courage to say what needs to be said, then guess what doesn't get done? Nothing. Like, you are not going to advance at all. So there's this part where you have to be in the position where you know what the right decisions are to make inside of the operation or the business that you're running. But then you have to have the courage to make the decisions. And guess what? When you are out there and you are openly speaking and speaking your mind and saying, hey, these are the decisions that I'm making, this is what needs to be done, you have to be the person that, one, has the courage to do it, but two, has the courage to take the criticism that's coming back at you too. Guys, this is just what happens. This is what every leader in this country deals with. When you're stepping out into this type of role, and I've had to experience this just as a leader for my team, for my members, as a leader just in the industry, and when I'm marketing and stuff. If you guys look at my Facebook ads, 50% of the people like me, 50% of the people hate me. Like they absolutely hate me. And that's fine. But that's the cost of being a leader. Think about the president of the United States. 50% love him, 50% hate him most of the time, right? So when you're stepping out into this role, you have to be prepared to be hated. And especially with family, you have to be prepared to be disliked by your brother, or maybe it's your sister-in-law, or it's your in-laws, or whatever. You have to be prepared to take this criticism and this hatred from your family, because it's a requirement, guys. Like if you want to be the leader and you have the characteristics of a good leader and you can see objectively what is supposed to happen inside of the operation and what's going to be best long-term. Yes, we're going to have to make some short-term sacrifices. There's going to be some short-term pain, but we're setting out to hit these long-term gains and this long-term profitability and these long-term targets. You have to have that viewpoint. And guess what? It's the toughest to keep that viewpoint. Keep your focus on that viewpoint when you have everybody else just coming down on you in the short term saying, oh, you're making this and this is how it's affecting my family and this is what you're doing. This is bullshit, blah, 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 blah. We all know how those discussions go on the farm. But at the end of the day, as a leader, you have to keep your focus on the long-term objectives and where you are leading the business. Now, again, guys, one of the biggest problems is nobody's stepping up as a leader in a majority of these operations. Nobody is. And that's what we help a lot of the members do inside of Legacy Farmer, because they're coming in and we may have some younger guys coming in that are in their 20s and 30s, got a young family, move back to the family operation. They're working with their dad and their brother or other siblings or whatever, and nobody's leading. And the dad is technically the one supposed to be leading. They're not leading because they don't know how to handle confrontation. They get uncomfortable when that uncomfortable energy is present, so they assume just to avoid it and not talk about it or confront these issues head on. Guys, those aren't the characteristics of a leader. And let's be honest, inside a lot of businesses today, not just ag, there are a lot of leaders that should not be in those roles because they can't handle the discomfort that comes with leading and the pushback that you get and this uncomfortable energy that you're put into these conversations that you have to have as a leader. We have a lot of people inside of businesses today that should not be in a leadership position at all. The last 2 banks I worked at, the guys that were the presidents of the banks had zero leadership ability. They did not have the characteristics of a leader. They were extremely selfish, and they taught me everything about what I didn't want to do when I stepped into my role. They taught me exactly how to not be a leader, if I'm being honest. So guys, you have to be willing to step into this. So maybe you're listening to this podcast right now, and maybe you're like, hey, you know what? I don't really have those characteristics as a leader. I like doing X and X and X inside the operation. If you give me a seat and I'm just in control of either, on a seat inside of the farm operation or inside of the cattle operation, that's great. Assign me in my seat. So-and-so in the operation is actually the person that has the characteristics of a leader. Okay, great. Go have that conversation with that person. That's actually you showing some leadership ability there, but go have that conversation with that person, guys, because the ultimate person that needs to step up and lead the operation, they have to have the qualities and the characteristics of a leader, but they also have to have the courage to make the decisions and the pushback that comes with that and the weight that they have to feel carrying all that pushback that's coming. Because when you're the one making the decisions, you got to deal with the consequences as well. Congratulations. Like, that's an awesome place to be in. That's a good leadership position to be in. And you should be grateful to be in that position, because guys, the leaders inside of this world are the people that get shit done. Like, let's be honest. They're the ones that make the hard decisions. They're the ones that are willing to do what is required in order to get those long-term results and long-term goals. And unfortunately, in this world today, it seems like they are very far and few between. Like, there's not too many of them out there, and there are not a lot of people that are willing to step up. And that's just how things have changed with our time. But what I'm challenging you to do is, inside of this right now, if you know that deep down inside of your operation, you should be the one as the leader, guess what the first thing is that you need to go do? Collide with your family members. Let them know, this is where I see myself and this is the role that I take. Now, the biggest problem is if you don't control the finances in the operation, good luck being the leader. And this is where we get into problems with a lot of people that are making decisions inside of this country and inside of small businesses and small towns and stuff like that. They're only making decisions because they control the checkbook. Well, if you inherited the checkbook and you didn't have to build the checkbook, because in order to build a checkbook, you have to be a leader and you have to make decisions and you have to face the consequences from those decisions. But if you just inherited the checkbook, you'd never had to face any consequences, but you still think you should have, the power and control to control everybody, right? And so like a lot of our members, they're in this position where, they're working on the family farm operation, dad and brother, whatever that is, and their dad is technically supposed to be the leader. Their dad is the one with all the assets and stuff like that. Guys, we literally help our members separate from the family farm operation because there's so much resentment that's happened. There's so many wounds that have been opened up from working with your family, and now it's impacting our members, personal lives. And guys, once it gets to that point, it's time to start separating. It's time to start breaking away. And again, short term, they'll be painful. But long term, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, you could actually go and have a conversation with your family and actually enjoy it a little bit, because you won't have all the negative things that are happening in the business on the back end of your mind while you're trying to have a conversation at Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? So it's a difficult thing to do. But again, this is a requirement, guys. This is a requirement. So you have to be the leader, right? You have to know what decisions to make, and then you have to have the courage to go out and make those decisions and put up with whatever comes next. And again, that's pushback from family. That's pushback from maybe your team. That's pushback from just other forms of consequences. And you got to be willing to carry that burden all the way to the finish line. There's no half-assing this. We have to go all the way to the finish line. You have to keep your focus on the long-term objective that you're aiming for inside your life. And it's a very difficult thing to do. But again, the rewards at the end, they're really great for you. So I push you to do this. So my friends, that concludes this episode. I hope you found it valuable. I hope you take action because of it. And we will catch you on the next episode.